Today is December 14th, and CAR has just released the new RPA, Residential Purchase Agreement. I will fill it out online here as a tutorial. Actually, I just filled one out, so I'll go through it and I'll explain how I did it. And hopefully you'll be more comfortable with the form by the time we're finished with this video. So it starts here with the disclosure regarding real estate agency relationship, which is the same as the old form. In fact, there are all these disclosures and advisories up front, just like we had before, where your client and you are signing, or just your client. We have the Fair Housing and Discrimination Advisory. We have possible representation of more than one buyer or seller, and wire fraud advisory. So we have all these disclosures that are just like how it was before with the old form. And then here we are. We arrive at the new residential purchase agreement. And I'll go through this line by line and explain how I filled it out. So we start here with the date that we prepare the form. This is the date we're drafting the form in the top left, the name of the buyer or buyers, and you'll put the name of the entity if it's a trust or a corporation or LLC. You'll put the street address, city, county, zip, assessor's parcel number, which can be found on the MLS listing, on the tax bill, on a title company's property profile or realist property profile. And if you really can't find it, just leave it blank for now and come back to it. But it's good to have. We have the confirmation of agency relationships, just like the last form. We have the listing brokerage and the brokerage license number, listing agent, and this is just sample information I put in. I put Angie agent, she's the listing agent, representing the seller exclusively, not a dual agent, her license number, and then my brokerage and license number, and my name and my license number. I check the box that I'm the buyer's agent. Now, this new format can be explained as splitting the RPA into two sections. The first section is a matrix or grid, which is what we're looking at here. And I'll scroll down just to show you the second section, which is just a sea of text. It's just like the old form where it's mostly all text. But what they've done is they've extracted key elements, key provisions, and they've put them up here or restated them up here in an easier to read grid format. So you'll see that there's a corresponding paragraph in this column that references that body of text I showed you below. And then this line just simply indicates the line of this matrix or grid that we're referring to. But it's essentially all the same terms as the last form, just in a new format where they've extracted key terms and put them in this grid. So we'll go through it, and it should make sense. And a word of encouragement too. You know, a lot of these things, if you leave them blank or you don't check boxes, the default is fine. The default is probably the best thing that you could put as an entry. So don't let this form intimidate you. We'll start here with the purchase price. I just made up $800,000, put it there. All cash, you would check this box, but we're not. We're going to do a financing offer. Close of escrow on line B, 30 days. Of course, you can go shorter if it's cash, and you can go longer if necessary. 45 is fairly common as a longer escrow, 60 even longer if necessary. If you want to close escrow on a definitive calendar date, check this box and write the date here. If you don't do anything on line C, this offer expires 3 days after the buyer signed. If you want to shorten that time, like put the pressure on the listing agent, you could put a calendar date. So we could put like tomorrow's date here, and then it'll automatically expire tomorrow at 5 p.m. Or you could put 12 p.m. and it'll expire tomorrow at noon. But if you do nothing here, 3 days, and then it expires. D1 is the EMD, earnest money deposit. They put initial deposit amount. I put 1% of the purchase price, $8,000. It should be 1 to 3%. Of course, that number is negotiable. And then here, excuse me, if you don't do anything, then the buyer is expected to wire escrow the EMD within 3 days. If you want to shorten that time, put it here. If you want to indicate that the buyer is going to deliver by personal check, check this box, write personal check here. But I wrote this offer the way I would write it, and I would leave this just the way it is. Increased deposit. This is rarely ever used, very, very rarely. If you do need to incorporate an increased deposit, check the box, write the amount, and when that deposit is due or goes into effect. Loan amounts. Now this will be commonly used. I'm doing an 80% conventional loan, so I put $640,000, and you can type in 80% here and it'll calculate that on zip forms. If you do nothing here, it assumes it's a conventional loan, which we're doing for my sample. If it's FHA or VA, check these boxes. If it's a seller financing loan, check the box. I put a rate not to exceed 4% as kind of like a max rate that the buyer would accept. You can get that number from the lender. You can leave this blank. Should you leave things blank? Probably not, but most agents do. Usually these two are left blank. The buyer to pay 0 points or up to blank percent. This line, so again, I'm filling this out as if I was actually writing the offer. I would leave this blank. You don't need to put it, no one cares. And I guess if it's an FHA loan, you could, and there's origination, you could put a percent in here, but I just think that this is unnecessary, and most agents don't even fill that out. So even if you left both these blank, it's not a big deal. The seller's just interested to see what kind of loan you're getting, to see how qualified of a buyer you are. All right, down here, if it's an FHA or VA loan, the list of lender required repairs should be delivered. So they're just stating the obvious, because FHA and VA have more stringent property condition requirements. So you should know this within the 17 days of the inspection period. And they're just kind of stating the obvious here. Now, if the inspection period is less than 17 days, you can reduce this number. But again, I just leave it the way it is and you'll be fine. If there's a second loan, you'll put it in here. If the seller's doing a carryback for the second loan or the remaining amount, you do it here. But I'm not, so I left it like this. All right, occupancy type, line E3. By default, if you do nothing, this is an owner-occupied property and you're done. End of story. If this is non-owner occupied, then you check one of these boxes. Why they split this into secondary and investment? Well, who knows what their reason is? I'm sure they have one, but I don't think it's a good one. This really should just say non-owner occupied and check the box. Why split it into investment or secondary? But whatever. The bottom line is it's owner occupied if you leave it the way it is. It's non-owner occupied if you check one of these boxes. Balance of down payment is automatically calculated when you complete this form. This is the down payment minus the earnest money deposit. Purchase price total, $800,000, and that's what matches up above. And this is just like the old form, just a little bit of a different format. So nothing to get too worked up over. Buyer to initial here. We continue on. This is a nice feature. Is a seller giving a credit? That's usually hidden somewhere, like in other terms or somewhere on the RPA on the old form, and that could cause issues. That was an item for contention because sometimes a buyer's agent would put that in, this listing agent wouldn't see. It would cause problems. And now they've brought it to the forefront, so it can be addressed prior to there being any sort of miscommunication. I put in $5,000 just to show that this seller's crediting the buyer $5,000. They have it calculated here as a percentage of the purchase price. This is silly and should not exist because the purchase price is subject to change, especially if they're negotiating repairs, and shouldn't have any bearing on this 5,000 number. So this shouldn't be reflected as a percentage of the purchase price. It should just be a flat number. But I'm sure someone will figure that out sometime in the future. In the meantime, just go along with whatever that number is. Leave this the way it is. This is silly. This seller, of course, a credit's going to be applied to closing costs. unless there's a reduction of the purchase price, which wouldn't be stated here anyway, because this is the offer. But whatever, just leave this blank, you'll be fine. Additional finance terms. If there's anything else relating to the financing above that wasn't explicitly mentioned, go ahead and write it in this blank area. If not, leave it blank. So in the old form, this same thing existed, which is proof of funds or a lender qualification letter, and that the buyer has 3 days to deliver it after acceptance. Well, they have this here for proof of funds for an all-cash offer, proof of funds if it's a financing offer, and the funds proof is for the down payment and closing costs. And then here they have basically a pre-approval or pre-qualification letter. I know people, this is kind of industry jargon that people use qualification and pre-approval and all these things, and everyone has their own. I mean, I see this used interchangeably so much that it's, I don't know why they need to put that out here, but they're used, on the old form, there was a checkbox because an offer really should include a proof of funds and a lender pre-approval letter. But for the sake of writing up an offer, just leave it the way it is. It's fine. And just submit the proof of funds and the lender pre-approval with your offer, and this is all becomes meaningless. If you don't have it with you and you need to submit the offer, well, this gives you 3 days to follow up with that letter. Final verification of condition, 5 days before close of escrow. When's your buyer going to do the final walkthrough? If they want to do it closer to the close of escrow, you can put 3 days prior to close of escrow. But again, you leave it blank and it's fine. Assignment request, 17 days. Basically, if there's going to be an assignment involved, like the buyer's assigning this contract, that needs to happen within the inspection period. This should actually have a checkbox here because this is a rare case, relatively speaking, to most offers. So I don't know why it's there, but whatever. There should be a checkbox. But again, leaving all this blank, you're gonna be fine. Loans. Is there a loan contingency? 17 days, just like the old contract. You're paying cash, no loan contingency. You'll check the box here to remove the contingency. Same with appraisal. 17 days for the appraisal contingency, just like the last offer, last form version of the RPA. Paying with cash, don't need an appraisal, check that box. This is a nice little addition though. Removal of appraisal contingency does not eliminate appraisal cancellation rights for FHA and VA loans. This is because you have buyer's agents that don't know better or maybe inexperienced. And because we have such an aggressive seller's market, FHA and VA buyers are actually sending offers where they remove the appraisal contingency, which is just patently insane. But they can't, because this is a regulated loan that requires a form to be done later, stipulating that they're subject to an appraisal. So this is kind of reminding people, this form's really built in with, in bowling, how they put the bumper rail guards so that the ball can't go into the gutter and it just kind of bounce off the sides and still hits pins. There's a lot of provisions in these forms that kind of protect people from making mistakes. So this is kind of a reminder, hey, if you're doing an FHA or VA loan, you cannot waive your appraisal contingency. And then now L3 through L7, this is just the inspection or investigation contingency. But since there are different components of the investigation and inspection contingency, they've broken it up into different parts. It's all 17. You know what? Loan used to be 21. I just realized that loan used to be 21. Now it's 17. Interesting. So yeah, it was appraisal and inspection were 17 before, and they have a loan as 20. Or it used to be 21, but now it's 17 on this. Okay, all right. So if you want more time, put it here. It's such a crazy seller's market though that people are putting less days for loans anyways. Maybe they're just factoring in that the industry has changed due to this crazy seller's market we're in. But interesting observation that we're departing from 21 and moving to 17 days. So if you're going to remove the inspection contingency, like you're writing this for some sort of investor that doesn't care about the condition, they're saying attach a contingency removal form, a CR form. Check that box. And then if you need to shorten or shorten or lengthen a certain component of the inspection contingency, you'll put it here. Sale of buyer's property. The buyer needs to sell their home before they are able to complete their purchase. You'll check this box and fill out a form COP. Possession. Buyer takes possession upon recording. You don't need to put anything else here. If it's going to be the following day or something, you can check a box and modify this. If not, just let it be. If the seller's staying in possession, check the appropriate box here. If it's 29 or fewer days, this box. 30 or more days, this box. If the seller is staying in possession for 29 or less days, do a seller in possession form, SIP. If the seller is staying in possession for 30 or more, do a RLAS, residential lease after sale form. Same idea with tenant occupied units. You're going to do this form, TOPA, if there are tenants, like it's an investment property. All right. These are seller disclosures. This is showing you the amount of time the seller has to provide the buyer with disclosures. If you need more time, you can put it here, but I would say just leave it the way it is. That's the default on this. When in doubt, just leave it with the default verbiage. The timelines are customary to how we do real estate in California, so you're going to be fine. Buyer's going to initial here like they do on every page. Items to be included and excluded. You'll check all the boxes here. Is the refrigerator staying? Is the washer and dryer staying? I hope the stove is staying. Check all the boxes that are of what's conveying. I don't remember checking the box bathroom mirrors. I don't know if it's automatically checked. This is kind of weird. This is odd that they have this. But ultimately, as the buyer's agent, you're just going to check what you want to convey, and I would hope bathroom mirrors would be included. Anything else you want to ask for, or anything that may be an item that could be up for debate later, like, I don't know, a safe that looks like it might be built in, or a certain fixture on a wall. Or excluded items. Excluded items, you'll put here. If the seller has already stated, hey, that we're taking this chandelier in the dining room, you'll acknowledge it and put it here. Dining room chandelier. But I left it all blank. Now this, I would be checking boxes like crazy. Let's jump down to closing costs. Just like the old form. Natural hazard disclosure. Seller typically pays. I put the company. And I usually check environmental. Right here, Q2. I should have put it, but I didn't. Q2, you would put pest inspection. Pest inspection report. Paid for by the seller. And they don't show. Okay, so they don't show where you're naming a company. I would assume that the party that it's determined by the party that is paying for the report. So here's an example. Q2, pest inspection, wood destroying pest inspection, termite inspection. People are going to write termite. They're just going to write termite, and that's fine too. But any of those things I mentioned, wood destroying pest, wood destroying organisms, that's what they used to be called, termite report, whatever you want to do, you can put it right there. Seller to pay, that's what I'd put. You do a property inspection, buyer to pay, right there. But this is where you'd put it. Smoke alarms. Seller. I'd have the seller check that box. So smoke alarm, CO2, water heater bracing, these are all required by the state of California. The seller deliver the home with all of this functional and compliant. So have the seller deal with that. Some cities require point of sale inspections. And you're going to check the box of which party is going to address that. You should know if the city that the home's located in requires a point of sale inspection or report. Several do around the state. And if there's any sort of corrective action, like let's say you have a city inspection, they say, hey, this thing wasn't permitted, it needs to be corrected. Who's going to pay that? Well, I say the seller. Agents have been leaving these blank on the last form. And I think it's silly because why not address it in advance? Should this come up, should this arise, who's going to be responsible? Because unless you want the transaction cancelable or voidable if this comes up. But the bottom line is you don't want to get 2 weeks in escrow or even 3 weeks in escrow and then have the city say that something needs to be repaired and the seller say, well, I'm not doing it. And the buyer said, well, why would I pay to have your unpermitted deck covering or patio covering corrected? Why would I do that? I mean, the buyer shouldn't, unless they negotiate it into the sale, maybe. But anyway, so I think these should be addressed, but I know agents leave these blank. It's just the way it is. Escrow fees, they now have a both in there. It used to be you had to check both boxes. Now they have a both. Agents would, in the past, they check buyer, seller, and right, each pay their own. I mean, now they've just kind of incorporated what agents already do, so it's fine. I mean, Northern California and Southern California are different. In SoCal, people are going to be checking this box. In Northern California, they'll be, depends on the county, but you'll know what to do depending on where you're located. If you're in SoCal, just check this box. Escrow company name, owner's title insurance and policy. In SoCal, seller pays. Northern California, it varies. Title company, if different than escrow holder. That's because in SoCal, title and escrow are often different companies. In Northern California, title company and escrow company are usually the same. Buyer's lender, title insurance, buyer pays. This is the same as it was. This is very much the same as it was in the last contract. County transfer, city transfer, HOA fees. This varies depending on your location, the state. In SoCal, the seller pays all this. It's different in Northern California. And this is the same as the old form. And then they have blank areas if you want to put like fees or costs. Not a fan of the way that's written, but if you want to have your client pay for your transaction coordinator, gosh, I really don't like how this is written. Excuse me. So if you want to have your client pay for something or the seller to pay for something, you'd write it in here and indicate who's paying. I don't know if there may be room to write text plus a dollar figure. That's why I think this is a poor format. But anyway, this is the auxiliary area where you can write in a fee that you want your the party, the seller or buyer, to bear, and you could put. And sometimes agents put like a transaction coordinator or a broker processing fee or something here. If it doesn't fit here to your satisfaction, then just put it down here in the other terms. Home warranty plan, who's going to pay, cost to exceed, issued by, pretty straightforward. Buyer's going to initial. And we are now departing the grid matrix and entering the sea of text. All right. It's asking you, so if you have a unique scenario, it's going to show you where you can incorporate addenda or addendums into this agreement. So basically, the takeaway from this section is if it relates to your unique transaction, check the box and include the form. And all this is just the text that explains what we've addressed up above in that grid and matrix. It talks about the deposit. It talks about who's holding it, loan, this is all just, I mean, this is something that you don't need to fill anything out. This is the default text, because if someone has a question about something up on top, they can go down and reference the explanation down here. Condition of property. This came up in a call I was on yesterday. What happens when you close escrow and something happened? Maybe the seller was moving out and damaged something. Who's responsible? I mean, so this is all the boilerplate text that protects both parties and sets the perimeters of the sale. Appraisal. Yeah, so we're scrolling through it because there's no point in talking about this at length. I mean, you can read up. I mean, even if agents read this, there's usually more questions, but you read it as it pertains to a question you have up above on a provision we filled out in that grid matrix. All right, I'm scrolling through. Buyers initialing all this. See, this is talking about the buyer's investigation. This was addressed, remember paragraph 3L, and I was showing you 17 days, and they break it down into different things. Let's see. They add something about the pest control report. Yeah, so yes, again, you want to make sure that pest control report is written in, or else it's up to the buyer. It's the buyer's responsibility to get the pest inspection report unless they ask the seller to pay for it up above where I showed you. We're scrolling through because that's what we would do if we were filling this out for a client right now. We're having our client sign. We're dropping our little digital signature boxes here. And then we're going to come to this part. What happens to the deposit if the buyer breaches? Well, the seller gets it. Of course, provided all contingencies were removed. So let's say at the last minute the buyer breaches. This is what entitles the seller to the deposit: liquidated damages, buyer initials. Why would the parties not initial here if they were going into this in good faith? So this should be initialed. That's what I'm saying. Automatically, if a dispute arises, the parties agree to go to mediation. That's paragraph 30. They're going to mediation. If mediation doesn't work, what happens? Do they go to a court? Do they litigate? Or do they go to arbitration and make it a little, theoretically, a less expensive experience? Arbitration of disputes. And if you initially hear it, it activates arbitration. So no matter what, this mediation is the first course of action. But arbitration must be elected by having the parties initial here. If they don't initial here, they don't elect to agree to go to arbitration. And then both parties initial at the very bottom. So you have 3 places to initial on page 14 of 16. Buyer's going to sign down here. This is where the seller would accept. Not too different than the old form. Pretty straightforward. Hold on. We have buyer signature here. Seller signature here. Why are there initials on this page again if they're already signing up here? Okay. And then we have the real estate section where we're identifying the brokers involved and the escrow holder. It makes sense to have initials here. Buyer investigation advisory. Buyer should do lots of investigating. Make sure they really want the property. Buyer signs. That's it. Any questions you have? Oh, can't forget this. This is why this whole attachment is 25 pages. It's a 25-page offer. But don't be intimidated by its length. It's fairly straightforward to fill out. Buyer's going to sign down here, California Consumer Privacy Act Advisory. If you have questions, please leave a comment and I will promptly answer them. Perhaps there's something that you see or something that I missed. I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment. Thanks so much for watching.